Hello, my name is Matthew Kasper and I am the resident conductor of your Phoenix Symphony. A few weeks ago, I had the distinct pleasure to sit down with our principal trumpet, Chuck Berginc, who is retiring from the orchestra after 38 seasons. Although I have only had the pleasure to work with Chuck for 5 of those 38 seasons, I have been able to experience firsthand the impact Chuck has had on this orchestra and on this community. Chuck's sound on the stage and personality on and off stage have been a big part of this orchestra's identity for a long time and will sorely be missed. In our interview, Chuck and I spoke about life in the orchestra, life after the orchestra, and a host of other topics surrounding his tenure in the Phoenix Symphony. Although I will miss asking Chuck every day how he's doing and getting the response, "There are worse ways to make a living, so pretty good," myself, the board, staff, and musicians of the Symphony truly wish Chuck and his wife every happiness in their retirement. Here now is my interview with Chuck Berginc, outgoing principal trumpet of the Phoenix Symphony. I hope you enjoy.
So one day I sat down and tried to figure out in 44 years how many concerts I played. I mean, it's like 8,000 or something.
That's amazing. So, I mean, like, think about it. I mean, so 8,000 concerts, it's like, what, like, did anything ever change? Because I know you talk to certain artists, and like, I've performed, thousands of times. I still get a little nervous when I go on stage. I'm still, there's that energy. Like, did that change for you over that time, or was there still a little,
Did I certainly got more comfortable as the years went by. That's maybe obvious.
Right.
But as far as, I mean, I still would feel different things, different nights. It would kind of depend. But, so I think a lot of it had to do with, who knows, the amount of sleep I got or whatever. But no, I mean, Mahler 5 is still Mahler 5,
Yeah.
And I would still,
Right.
preparing, one of the things I would do is I would stand up at home, just like as if I was bowing with the orchestra, and sit there and wait for like 30 seconds while the conductor gets all oriented and getting ready to go, and imagine the silence. And then I would practice it, I mean, I had to put myself in that frame of mind. But yeah, it got a lot more comfortable, particularly last year when I knew, it's like, okay, what can I do here? I'm going to do the best I can, try not to embarrass myself,
Well, and you didn't, so that was good.
Yeah.
So, I guess that's something that's interesting, the way that you practice that, because I think me being a string player, playing principal trumpet in an orchestra, the psychological aspect of that is a lot different than being part of a mass section, I think. And your wife Cindy is a violinist, so what do you think are some of the differences that even you two have to go through versus preparing for a concert, for rehearsal and stuff like that?
Well, there are two sides for me, right? The one side is that the most uneducated person in the back of the hall knows it when the trumpet player misses a note. They just, you can't hide. There's no hiding. So you got to take your licks and hope you do the best you can. And the flip side of that is that if you make a mistake, nobody's going to die.
Right.
It's not brain surgery. You get embarrassed. I was embarrassed plenty. And it goes away. You just do the best you can. And that's, I think that gets into a lot of trumpet players and maybe brass players, but trumpet players' heads as they go on. And if they have a little trouble, then all of a sudden, if you're not careful, you start to cogitate, well, what are all the things that I'm not working on? Or how do I fix this? Or you start changing things. And then I've seen it repeatedly where guys just screw themselves up and they're in their late 50s and they just can't play anymore.
Yeah.
So it's that part of it. Now, and Cindy, in the prep, for her, she just took it so seriously, to be prepared and to show up, and figured she needs to be an example for the people around her.
So were you principal in San Antonio?
No, I was second trumpet.
Okay. So let's bring me back to when you took the audition in Phoenix and found out you won, and that's a
Oh,
change moving to Phoenix. Like, what was that like?
that that, that was really interesting the whole way it went down. It was a time, it was 1982, and it was a time in my life where I was making the finals pretty regularly for all kinds of orchestras. And I was one of two people left standing in LA for an associate job. And Phoenix had already had a principal trumpet audition and didn't hire anybody. So the chairman of the committee in Phoenix called the principal trumpet in LA and said, "Did you hear anybody that we should consider?" And he was so nice. I really didn't know the guy hardly at all, but he said, "Oh, you should just hire Chuck Bergens," which, it's nice to, I didn't know that till well after the audition. So
Yeah.
they called me among, and then I was one of 8 people that they invited to then come to an audition. And it was just like any other audition. I just went in and did what I did. And in the end, I guess for them, which I appreciate, for them, it was easy, they said, so that was really nice to hear. And it made me feel supported. Then when I began the job, I could feel like, well, I was myself in the audition. I'm not perfect. I'm who I am. In the way I play the trumpet and my personality for the music, and that I can just be myself, and I'm going to fail sometimes and I'm going to do great, and I'm hoping that everybody's as understanding after a couple 3 years. So it was pretty cool to do that. When I came here, I never expected to meet the love of my life, so I was thinking 2 or 3 years and I'd be maybe moving on to a 52-week orchestra.
Yeah.
But that wasn't meant to be, and I'm really happy the way it turned out. Both Cindy and I had a great life in Phoenix, and I can't imagine changing a thing.
So joining a new orchestra, because I think for most people when they get a job, it's a job, but making music together is a very personal thing and a very emotionally charged thing. Uh, what was that like joining a new orchestra? There's obviously different personalities, both human and musical personalities. What's that like to sort of be thrown into that situation and just take that all in and figure out how fit into the mix?
Wow, that's a good question. Uh, that's probably the greatest difficulty, I guess. That's a great question, because that's the greatest difficulty, I think, for any of us that come into an orchestra. It's like, now, how do we make this work? I knew when I was hired that the conductor, Teo Alcantara, at the time, had expectations about where he wanted the orchestra to go. And so I felt a lot of freedom with him to just really be myself musically, and sure, fit in with certain things, but also be more of a leader, I guess, in certain ways. And playing principal trumpet, I always saw it a little bit like playing lead in a big band. I mean, I just sort of have to lay it down at times and hope that people come along. But at the same time, shortly after I was hired, uh, there was a bunch of new brass players that came into the orchestra, and that was really great. That was really fun. We then could talk more and make some decisions on our own. And like to this day, Chris Wolf and I, the principal trombone, and I would confer on all kinds of things and say, how do you want to do this? And it you just have to do that.
Yeah, yeah. What's it like playing in an orchestra with your wife?
Oh, it was great. It's great. Absolutely. It was so wonderful in so many ways. People can tell you in the orchestra, they would see me. they would see me look over at her and just kind of watch her play because I couldn't hear her really, but I could watch her play. And I know how she sounds and I could see from the movement what she's doing. And that just made me smile. And then the reverse was true. If I was playing something, there was often people would say, you should have seen the look on your wife's face when you played X, you had some solo or something. And of course, that's really fun. And also I had someone who I could trust that I could ask any question about my playing to. And she's out there near the front of the stage and in a distance, farther away. And I could say, hey, the pitch is not right here. Or am I behind here? Or should I be doing this much? And I could get a lot of fabulous feedback because she was there. So that was, and I probably could ask questions that I wouldn't be as comfortable asking some other colleagues. Maybe that's obvious. So that was really terrific.
So being in an orchestra for 38 years, you've seen a lot of different people go in and out of the orchestra, go in and out of the management, on the podium. Do you have any, favorite moments with people or favorite personalities that you've come into contact with over the years that you'd like to share?
Well, it may be because it was, new clothes for me when I started, and I felt so supported. But I loved playing concerts with Teo Alcantara. That was really fun at the beginning. I mean, he gave the orchestra a lot of freedom. He made it really fun for all of us, and we felt often when the concerts were over that man, that was a great performance, and people were excited after those performances. And then certainly playing for Hermann Michael, we played and we did romantic composers, Bruckner and Mahler and Strauss. Wow. It was fantastic to do that with him. And players, wow. There's so many, one person that I've respected the whole time, and we started the same year, 1982, is Marion. Marion Buswell. She was utterly amazing, from the beginning. And I just hear her playing with the same love of music and the same sound. And so that was always great to hear, Yeah. And then of course, I think Stephen coming in as our concert master has raised the level of a lot of us in every way. So those are some things that I certainly will always remember.
Yeah, I actually heard about Marion even before I came here because my conducting teacher hired her in Kansas City before she came to Phoenix. So he, yeah, I mean, and even
Wow.
back, told me how musical she played, and just there was the soul was connected always to the sound, and yeah, I mean, you still hear that now.
Still hear it.
Yeah. What are you going to miss the most?
Oof. There's so many things. I'm going to miss a lot. I'm going to miss the challenge of the big pieces that we would do, and I'm going to go back to Mahler and Strauss and Copland, some of the big composers that use a lot of trumpet and that where I'm really exposed. I liked this. It wasn't so much, I was going to say the spotlight, but it wasn't the spotlight for like, yay me, but it was really important for me. And I loved being challenged. I guess that's the best way I can put it. Whenever it was really a challenging part for me, that's what I'll miss the most, is being able to sit down and then execute, to be able to execute that and play the concert and pull it off and feel like I did a good job. That I will miss forever. And that wasn't that often that it would happen, but it happened enough that, I'll remember that. So I'm going to miss that. And in the end, those exciting moments that we all put together that's, you can't replace that.
No. What are you going to miss the least?
Rehearsals.
Yeah, I mean, I think the energy, we're talking about the refinement or trying to get the refinement in the overall sound, and then just like this energy of performance. And, I think there's a real difference of, taking what you have in rehearsal, but also being able to sort of just let it go during the performance. And that for me is the greatest part as well. I've
always sensed that people, when they feel a little bit under rehearsed, they almost focus better. Not always. I can't say that always, but I could hear the orchestra as a whole become more focused and more cohesive and listen better and saying, wow, we got to somehow pull this off. What do we do? And so that's really fun. That's a fun part of what we do.
Yeah. What advice would you have for a young orchestral musician that has won their first job and embarking on a lengthy career such as you've had? What have you learned over the course of your career that, you wish you would have known at the beginning?
Well, I didn't know it at the beginning when I started playing in an orchestra in 1976, but I knew before I came to Phoenix, because I had talked to a lot of principal trumpet players and studied with people, and that was a common question from me. And one thing I was told, which I did, was to try to stay a month ahead of the schedule. So therefore, if you're playing Beethoven Fifth in a month ahead of that first rehearsal, you should have it so prepared that you could play the concert on that day. So that means before a month in advance, get your butt in gear and study and listen to the scores and listen to the recordings and study the scores and work on the music and get it the way you want it. And I found that if I stayed a month ahead of the schedule, then I could feel really well prepared to show up for work when it was time. So for me, that was invaluable. And I think anybody should probably think about that, no matter what you're in.
Absolutely.
And then to answer the longevity part, it's a marathon. So the same way that if you're a marathon runner, then you probably could go a lot harder for a longer period of time than most people. But just let's say you're an average runner that does longer runs and you want to do a marathon, that you're going to have to pace yourself, right? You can't waste it all here or there. And that's true during a piece of music. You could take Bruckner as an example. I mean, it's so sustained and the phrases are so long and the endurance is difficult that you have to somehow pace yourself so that you don't. The worst thing you can hear is a brass player just totally lose it at the end of a phrase. You got to make it to the end. So that's in a minutia, but in a larger scale, from concert to concert and from rehearsal to rehearsal and for certain weeks, and if you have back to back to back tough concerts, tough pops concerts like we do, there's just times you have to say, I'm not going to push myself so hard today. I'm going to take it easy. And then I was never embarrassed to use an assistant for a variety of things. And so consequently, retiring at 68 years old, I feel like I could still play a few more years if I wanted to, and I think that's the time to retire, frankly. The adage is I'd rather retire 5 years too soon than 5 minutes too late. And so I think that just pacing myself as a brass player and knowing when to take it easy helped me to not totally lose it at age 58 instead of 68.
Right. Unfortunately, the season was cut short, so you weren't able to play your final concerts with the orchestra. What message would you want to impart on our audience and your colleagues?
Yes, that was a big disappointment. In one way, it was a disappointment not to just give hugs and say goodbye. But the message that I'd like to say upon leaving would be how wonderful it was that I could spend 38 years with the Phoenix Symphony and have a great life, and have a great life with my wife working in the orchestra, and to be able to raise two beautiful daughters, and the incredible audience members and donors and board members that supported us enough that I could do that. So I really want to thank all of them for that. In addition, I developed, at least by sight, relationships with a lot of audience members. And they were always just so supportive, and you could tell how much they loved coming to the orchestra. And it just made me feel like, okay, we are touching people, and it helped me to know that people's psyche were being touched for an evening. And for my colleagues, I would just say thanks so much for your support and for putting up with me and encouraging me and just being my friend all these years. So thanks to everybody.
Well, Chuck, I can say over the last 5 years, it's been a pleasure getting to know you and Cindy.
Thank you.
Both musically and personally. And it was an honor to be able to be on the podium for your last Messiah here in Phoenix. And that was a very special moment for me. And I think for the audience and orchestra as well.
It was special for me too. I thank you. And I loved doing that with you. It was just great. So I was glad that we could do that together.
Yeah, it was a great opportunity. And what's next for you? What are you going to do? What are you going to do in retirement?
Oh, well, people have asked me, are you going to play? And I haven't yet gotten real serious about if I'm going to play the trumpet, in retirement. But I'm not going to say never. So, there's might be a day, but I think if I do, it's going to be probably transcribing like Tower of Power tunes and playing along with the recordings, and maybe, getting some big band charts and playing with recordings of those. And I don't know about performing, but playing in my basement and having a good time, I expect to do that. But other than that, we're retiring to Colorado, and the being outdoors here is the thing, any season. And I'm so excited to just be out and about, and I'm a bird watcher, so I want to do a lot of bird watching. I was out today doing that. And what Cindy and I did this morning is, just by chance, I put on some high fits, and we spent an hour listening to high fits playing all kinds of solo pieces, from solo Bach to Saint-Saëns to big concertos. And we just sat there and just were in awe, and had certain emotional moments just listening to that. So listening to music is something I'm going to do every day for the rest of my life, I know.
That's great. Well, Chuck, we wish you all the best. I thank you for, all your years of music making here in Phoenix. I was only here for 5, but 38 years is a long time. You've done a lot for the orchestra and a lot for the community. And so glad we got to do this interview today.
Me too. Thanks for doing it, and thanks for asking the questions you did. I really appreciate it.